In this video, we will talk about input function. So what does this input function do? Input function in Python allows the user to communicate with the program. It is used to take inputs or messages from the user that is required by the program. Here is an example. A name is a variable that is assigned to a function called input, and inside you pass the message giving hint to the user to what the input value is required. And here I have given the demonstration. So name equal to input, what is the name, and when I enter coda prints and hit enter, when you type name you will see the coda prints is stored in the variable name. So what is the syntax of input function? It's just very simple. Input followed by open and closing parenthesis. Inside you give a prompt message. A prompt message is a string representing a default message before an input, and it is an optional. Like even if you don't give this prompt message, it is no error. So say you want to take an input, but you don't know, or the user does not know what the input is about, like whether it is an age or a name or a roll number or whatever that's required by the program. So hence you provide this text message or a string so that it helps the user identify what kind of information is the program requires. But in competitive programming, in platforms like HackerRank, CodeChef, when you solve any problem using Python, you need not print any extra messages, even a prompt message or other than the specified by the format, you don't need to print anything. So this is the general syntax. Coming to the return type and typecasting, a return type of the inputs function is a string by default. Let me take an input equal to input of enter anything. Now let me enter an integer number 25 and let me just try to print the type of it. So you can see it's a class of string. So in order to convert any input, you need to do a typecasting. So here for typecasting, we have a demonstration to how to take integer and floating point input. So to get an integer input, we just need to use the same format syntax and just close it with the int. So int of input enter number. So whatever you enter, it will be passed to integer. So now you can see type of integer is of class int. And in the similar way, you use a float keyword or a function to get the floating point value. So after the decimal point, it will take it. But if you give something like 36 ABC or 36.25a, that is not at all a integer or floating number, and hence that will give you an error. So let's say, for example, int equal to int of input enter a number. Now when I will say 25a, you will see it is not it says invalid literal because it's a value error that it is not an integer or it cannot be passed to an integer. In the similar way, if you try to interpret with a float point, that also gives you the same error. Coming to errors raised by input function, the normal errors, we have syntax error and end of file error, EOF error. So syntax error is raised if a syntax is not correct or syntactically valid. So whenever you miss something, you misspell the input or whatever, if you try to mismatch the closing parenthesis, that happens to be a syntax error. End of file error will be raised when there is an end of line when trying to input. So this mostly happens in the competitive programming platform where you will try to run the loop or try to take some input, but you don't specify in the proper format. So thank you.